So here's a couple of things that I want to make sure, because some people asked me during the break. Couple quick things. Number one, Apogee 127 or A127. You can use it, again, deploy it anywhere. We don't care. All right. The only thing that if you want to use our OAuth, then you have to have an account at Apogee. And it's really expensive. It's called free. Okay. We are actually the only provider. No other API / mobile backend as a service or whatever we're calling ourselves these days. We're the only provider that actually has a developer version or developer account, if you will. It's free. It's unlimited. Seriously, unlimited. Free, unlimited, and forever. And commercial use is okay. Okay, so we have a ton of startups that are building their apps and things on our back end. We don't come knocking. We don't say, hey, come on, pay us some money now. We wait for you to actually tell us it's time for us to pay money. Okay, so just wanted to mention that. Also, second thing, I don't believe I explained it quite well enough, so I'm just going to go back and say when you make that call to /restaurants, for example, the process is this. It hits /restaurants, the call is made, the Node app, call is made, but instead of just actually going straight into that get restaurants and firing that function, the first thing that happens is that the call is rerouted to the Swagger document. And yes, I said to the Swagger document. We have a process that says, go look at the Swagger document and see if this is a valid call, and checks all of the things that you are making in the call. So through that process, you, as the developer, don't have to write any error handling or rejection handling, if you will, right? Because it's being handled by Swagger, okay? So that's the other side. All right, so now, shifting gears. Now we're going to talk about Ignite Engine. So Ignite Engine is another open source project. And also just to mention, at Apogee, everything we do is open source. Everything that in fact, the platform that all those customers pay us for is actually open source. Okay? So everything that we do and we open source it immediately. So please join in and help us, especially on Ignite Engine, because it's brand new. I'm really proud of it. I'm really excited. This is only the third time I've ever shown this. So you guys are the third time that someone has seen this out in the world. All right. Ignite Engine came about from a couple of our developers who worked on our what we call our customer success team. And the customer success team, what they do, or what these developers were doing, was building prototypes of apps for customers, helping them say, okay, you've got a mobile app, you need to build a mobile app, whatever. We'll get you started. We'll show you a prototype. We'll build a prototype for you, talk about the APIs and how the APIs should be structured and all of that. And so that's what they did. And they've been doing that. They've been iOS developers since iOS began. And they have one thing to say about Objective-C. And I'm not allowed to repeat that in public. And I'm sure you're saying, well, but now there's Swift. They added a couple of adjectives on to describing Swift. So they said, wouldn't it be cool if we had a faster, easier way to build our prototypes that didn't require doing all of the things, that didn't require Objective-C or Swift, right? Now, I'll be honest and tell you, having been at Adobe when we bought Natobi, who started PhoneGap, I'm a huge hybrid PhoneGap supporter, and so I went to them. I said, "Well, just do it in PhoneGap." And they said, "Yeah, but PhoneGap, we can argue as to performance and those kind of things. We want to do it native." And I said, "Well, all right. So what are you going to do?" So they sat down and thought through what would it look like to build a native app in a faster way, first of all? What would make it faster? And they came up with this idea that has turned into what we now call Ignite Engine, and we open sourced it, like I said, about a month and a half ago. The iOS version, the Android version we're working on, and will be open sourced very shortly as well. And so here's what it is. The Ignite Engine allows you to, it's a framework that allows you to build native apps using JSON. So you simply declare your views, your controls, and everything in JSON, and then when the app runs, it's actually a native app. It works like this. So as I said, you have a JSON object, or JSON file, that describes everything on the screen. And then when you launch that app, the Ignite engine runs on a background thread and says, I'm going to take that JSON, I'm going to read it, I'm going to parse it, and then I'm going to build a native UI with native controls out of that JSON, right? So what that means is it is truly native. Every control that you see on the screen is actually a real native control, okay? This is not HTML, not CSS. So how does this work? Well, first, when you start an app, the very first thing that we have is an app.json file. And that app.json file describes the initial load, if you will, right? Sort of very similar to our server.js file when we were doing Node, right? That is going to say, this is what I'm doing. This is the thing that I'm going to launch. For example, on the right-hand side, you can see that one of the first attributes is view.index. So it's telling me what is the very first initial view that I should load, right? Do I want some debugging enabled? Do I want to log when we are talking to data sources and so on? Other things that are not important for us right now. When we start an Ignite project, you actually can download, and I'll show you where in a minute. You download a zip file, or if you want, you can do a manual install through NPM, and everything that you build goes inside of a folder called assets. And this assets folder can contain not only JSON, but all the other things like images or media files that you're actually going to supply to the app. So it is really the core of your app. Now, a view itself, that's actually the screen that you're looking at, right? And so this view, each view has its own separate JSON file. And inside of that, we put all of the UI, if you will. So for example, on the right-hand side, you can see that I have a view that says I've got an attribute. My ID is my initial view. I'm turning my status bar, the thing at the top of, on iOS, at the top to dark. I'm doing a background color and so on. And then I have a section called controls that is an array. And these are all of the things that we put into the actual app itself. So the first control is a layout control. Now, if you've done any iOS development, then all of these things map one-to-one to the actual controls in native iOS or in native Android as well. So we said this is a layout, and it has attributes. The neat thing that I like about this is that coming from a web background, it's very familiar to me. I have size.w, size.h. That's my width and height, right? Okay, cool. I have visible equals true. Okay, great. Woo! All right, so it's all things that come from the way that I think as a front-end developer, right, using CSS. So then we have finally another control inside of a control. So certain controls can have things inside of other controls. And we have, in this particular case, ID Ignite Engine logo. What is it? Type equals image. Okay, so now we know what that is. And again, visible true, size and width and height, alignment in the center. Where is the image coming from? Okay, so the views, again, very, very simple to, and controls are very, very simple to create. So if I wanted to have a button, for example, in the middle of my screen, then I would simply say inside of my view, I would like to have a control that has an ID of button, that has a type of button, and that has some attributes, right? This looks like CSS written in JSON. And that was the whole point. I'll get to questions in just a second. So what about behavior? Because in the web, we need JavaScript. How do you do JavaScript in JSON? Well, we said, how about we call it actions? And these actions are actually things that can be done. So for example, we have a type alert. When you click that button, we want that to actually fire that alert. So it says, all right, type alert. Great. What would you like to put in there? We've got a message and a title. And when do you want it to happen? On touch up. So you don't have to write any JavaScript either, right? And there's one little extra thing I'll talk about in just a second with JavaScript. So that's pretty cool. But what about, where do I get my data from? Well, obviously, an API, right? So we're going to go out and talk to the web. So when we talk to the web, again, we can load this using HTTP. In this particular case, the code on the right says what we're going to do is we've got a data source. We're going to call it data restaurants. What kind of data source is it? We support two. One's called HTTP. The other one is called zip. I'll tell you why in just a second. So HTTP is our data source. It says actions. What would you like to do? Well, on the success of the load, we would like to do a refresh. For example, we would like to refresh an object. In this particular case, it's a thing called collections restaurant. So that is that list in the middle of the screen. When we get the data back, we want it to refresh, right? There you go. Now, do we want this to fire automatically? We have auto load enabled true. Otherwise, if we turn it to false, then we were going to have some button or some other user interaction that's going to trigger the loading of that data. What kind of method is it using? It's a get, and where is the URL? Now, the neat thing is, look at that URL. It says HTTP some URL.net, blah, blah, API, restaurants, question mark, LL equals, square bracket, $ device. What in the heck is that? What that is a variable. So anything that you want to declare that might change, you simply surround by two square brackets. And that says, this is a variable, go figure out what this is, right? So this is saying, go figure out $ device. In other words, go talk to the device and use its GPS to find out what its location is, what its latitude and its longitude is, okay? So you can find Ignite at ignite.apigee.com. And when you go there, you'll actually see this page. This is actually the not only your landing page, but also your documentation. I'll just go ahead and go there for a moment. So you can see, here we are. What I would encourage you guys to do, I'm going to show you a more in-depth app here in just a second, but what I would encourage you to do once you get there, number one, after you scroll down and look at the installation, we have two different installation guides. One is the easy way and one is the hard way. Your choice. I like the easy way, all right, which is simply to download a zip file. And once you do that, then you can get started. I would suggest you go to our weather tutorial. It's a very simple tutorial. Lets you build a native weather app. And if this takes you longer than 10 minutes to do, you're doing it wrong. Okay, seriously. So you'll be able to work through that. Now, once you do that, then it's time to dive into things like controls. And in each and every one of them, for example, we were talking about buttons, so let's go take a look at buttons. So in each and every one of them, we have documentation that tells you, what are the attributes that are available to the button, what are the events, and then, quite honestly, hi, I'm Greg, I'm a developer. Do you know what that means? I copy and paste a lot. And in fact, that's exactly how I build every app that I've built with Ignite. I've built several so far. I just go into the docs, I copy and paste the code right in and just start changing the things that I need, right? So let me show you an app just so that you're convinced. I'm going to go into, I thought I put it out here on the, I did not. All right. So, and here. Okay, I forgot where I put my app. Oh, there it is. That's my wife laughing at me. Thanks, Steph. I love you too. All right. Okay, so let me go ahead and run this app first. Whoa, that's a huge thing. Very, very small. Not that. Oh, where is it? All right, let me kill that and start it again so you can see it. All right, so here we go. So here's the app. Okay, this is a native app, as I said. It's right now just grabbing some random data because I have not given it a location. Let's go ahead and simulate San Francisco. And we'll go back. And then here are the restaurants that are in San Francisco. Okay? This is basically the Yelp app that I built. When I built this restaurant, or this restaurant's app, this Yelp app, this took about 35, maybe 40 minutes to build. Okay, not counting all the back-end stuff, right, to get all that data, okay? So what does this actually look like? And again, this is all native. What does it look like? Well, it looks like this. There's that assets file or folder that I talked about, and we're just going to go open that up. We'll just take this entire thing and open it up in Sublime so you can see it. All right, so here is our app.json. So our app.json, as I said, starts off by telling us we want to go to the view restaurant.json, and that viewed restaurant.json, or restaurant list, sorry, is right here. And what is it saying? It's simply saying, all right, I have a couple of things. I have some controls. There's that layout that I talked about. And then inside of that, we have another layout. As you're getting used to the way that we talk in the Ignite engine, a layout is basically, for all of us, a div. Whenever, if in HTML, if you were designing something and you said, I would put all of this inside of its own div together, that's a layout, right? So we're just saying, okay, I have a layout. Great, that layout is my header. So that is actually this thing up here, right? And it has some attributes. It has a background color. It has some positioning. Anybody ever heard of absolute positioning? Hey, again, we've applied all of the principles of CSS here inside of JSON, right? So it's got a height and it's got a width. And then my divider is sort of funny because the one thing that we ran into, that's that orange line right there, is that in native iOS, you can't put a border on only one side of an object. It has to go all the way around an object. So I said, how will we do that? Well, what we did is we just decided, all right, let's just make a layout, and let's make that layout have a background color, have a 1 pixel height, and position it at the bottom of the object that it's in. And so, boom, I have a single border, right? And I have my text. And there is my fonts, my positioning, and all of that. Now, I get down further, I have my collection. This is my list. This is actually the list. There are two types of lists. There is a collection list and a grid list, right? So a grid, or sorry, I reversed that. There is a list, and we call that a table view, okay? Just a standard list. And then there's a collection, and that is a grid view. So if you wanted to have images like in your image browser with a bunch of things going, that's a collection. I chose to use a collection here only to show that it's possible to just use collections, because each one of my cells I gave a 100% width. So instead of my items in my list going along stacking as a grid, they're just saying I'm going to take up 100%. Right? Okay. Neat thing is, you want pull to refresh? There you go. You got it. with one little line, pull to refresh enabled. True, there we go. All right, so then we have our actions. This is actually the refresh action. It says, all right, well, when I do a pull to refresh, what should I do? Here's one of those variables that says, all right, what do I want? Well, I'm going to target self, which is me, the view that I'm in, my data source. And we're going to do that pull to refresh. The data source is down here. Again, as I showed you already. And what it is doing is just calling out to my API out there on the web. All right? Now, what gets interesting is when we drill down. So I'm drilling down. So now I've got some detailed information. I've got a map showing me where I am, showing me where the restaurant is, and showing me the review. That is in my detail. Now, how did I get there? Well, I got there simply like this. There is my control here. So here's my text. That's the text that we're seeing. But it too is a variable. So it's saying, all right, $row. Anytime we call to a data source, we automatically know that it's going to bring back multiple sets of, or multiple records, and therefore we can start calling out to the records themselves. And so we said $row name. So that's what's putting that in there. But what is actually making the thing go? Well, actually, one other thing, sorry. That is, this text thing is actually right here, the arrow that you're seeing right over here. We realized that there's a really cool way of making icons called fonts, right? So we actually put font awesome directly into the framework. So now when I just say FA angle right is actually my text, it knows it's font awesome, therefore it puts in that particular icon. So and all the icons that you see in my app are that way. So then how did it know? Well, it said, I know to navigate on touch-up over to restaurantdetail.json. So let's go take a look at restaurantdetail.json because there's a couple of things that I want to highlight here, specifically these stars, but also the map itself. So we have here some controls, again, restaurant details that are telling me, okay, what's the restaurant address, right? What's its city and all of those kind of things, right? But then if I actually go back over here for a second and I say, I want to tap the phone number or the contact info so that I can do an action sheet to email or call, that's really, really hard to do. I'm being facetious. Because all I have to do is say, hey, I want an action sheet, and I want to put the following things into that action sheet, and I want to have that happen when we press, right? So then here's our map. That's the entire map. That's the entire thing. That's all you have to do for the map with its attributes here to say, do you want to have the little pin drop on? Do you want to show the user's location in relation? And all of that. Again, just declaring declarative JSON. Finally, going down to the title or the reviews. So I had a bit of an issue here. I've got a spinner. There's no reviews. There we go. All right. So here are my reviews. And when I was laying this out, I said, well, I want some stars for my reviews. But the problem is, depending on the restaurant, oh, that's the same one I just clicked on. Let's pick another one. I might have differing star lengths, differing number of stars. First of all, my question was, how do I actually tell it how many stars I need? Second was, if one star is shorter or, I only have one star, the title could be longer than if I have 5 stars because it's going to need to wrap so it doesn't run underneath my stars, right? So I thought about that. I said, how is it that we're going to do that? And there you see it. You see the padding right? That, my friends, is called JavaScript inside of JSON. So we're actually doing an if right there. So this is a JavaScript if eval. Now, if you want to go further, let's say that number needed to be a variable too. I could actually do this. Let me wrap this. That is JavaScript, full-on JavaScript written in JSON. You can write full-on functions, because what we're actually doing is using the JavaScript eval statement, and you don't even have to write return, because we are just returning whatever the JavaScript evaluates out to. Okay, so you can write full-on JavaScript for all of your conditionals. Okay, I'm just going to undo all of that so my thing doesn't break here. There you go. And then finally, again, you can use that all over. So you can see I've got more of these happening down here. So the cool thing for me is that idea of, okay, I know how to do JSON. JSON's not hard. I know CSS. So all I need to do is combine the two into a declaration to say I can basically build anything. And the controls that we have support for are literally, I mean, as you look through, they're literally all of the controls that you would have in a native app. Okay? Now, you're not going to build a game using Ignite Engine. Okay? But anything that is something that I would classify as a productivity style app can be built with Ignite Engine. And the performance compared to truly doing it in Swift or Objective-C is, I'm going to toss a blanket over it and say exactly the same. Because we are using the exact same approach that Facebook used for React Native. React Native does it all in JavaScript. We do it all in JSON. React Native runs the JavaScript on a background thread. We run our JSON interpreter on a background thread. And so you have full-on native applications being done in JSON. Cool? All right. So there are right now out there in the App Store, there's actually 4 apps that have been built on this. So if you want, I've got it on my phone as well. So if you'd like to see the performance, I'll show you this very app running on my phone. And with that, Peter,